Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 13 of the Old Glory Games podcast. And if you were looking for part 2 of the Bubba Wallace disaster, well, you're going to have to wait at least another week. And I'm saying that because this particular podcast was recorded yesterday as part of a live stream. It's something that Greg and I are trying to work out and try to see if we can sneak in some real-time, pertinent, current information, because when we do our filming of these podcasts, we do them about 4 weeks, in the past. So if I were to do a podcast today recording, you wouldn't see this video for another 4 weeks. And so when you do that, you kind of lose some of the urgency and some of the relative nature of it being a current event, sort of a, water cooler type of thing. And so with this thing going on with this Harrison Butker, we decided that it would be cool if we did a live stream as well as some other things too, which you'll see in other videos. So this episode 13, we're going to deal with the Harrison Butker controversy and all that. And I hope you enjoy it. And next week, we'll do the part 2 of Bubba Wallace, because it seems to be a very popular video. So I can almost certainly say that episode 14 will be that, but no promises, because who knows what tomorrow's going to hold. And let me also say this about the recording. The quality will not be up to par with our standard podcast. And there's a reason for that. It's my fault. I didn't turn on local audio recording for myself and Greg. So what you're going to get is the actual broadcast audio. And so there were some drops in signals. There was some latency. So it's not going to be perfect. Not that the other ones were perfect, but there's going to be some imperfections that the other ones didn't have. Let's put it that way. And so sorry about that. Next time we will make sure we do have the local audio recording. That way we can sync them up and have it better. So what you're going to hear in this podcast, it will be cleaned up. It will be cleaned up in terms of post-production, but you can't clean up what's not there inherently. So sorry about that, but I think overall this particular episode should be fine. The other ones down the line after this might not be as much, but thank you for your patience on that. And again, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. My name is Kyle. This is the Old Glory Games podcast. And this episode, we're going to talk about the controversy going on with Harrison Butker and the comments that he made. Well, actually, he gave a speech, about 20-minute speech at a private Catholic school, small Catholic school. And somehow people are really upset about this. And we have some clips here that we can show you. But Greg, I think you had something specifically to talk about. I can lead into this thing that we saw from Jillian from The Biggest Loser, or do you want to just do that first?
Sure. So I can go ahead and make a comment if you like. So when I first heard about it, I had no clue what the furor was about. I'm like, well, what did he say? I've only known and heard about Harrison Butker as being a pretty nice guy. I do recall that once upon a time, the Panthers had him on their team. And like the Panthers have been known to do the past few years, they let Pro Bowl caliber players just go to other teams and win Super Bowls and be very successful. So anytime something like this happens, I take it upon myself to investigate. Let me see what this is about. So I had only seen bits and pieces of Harrison Butker's speech. And I'm like, well, that's not fair, because I know media outlets and people with certain agendas, they're just going to cherry pick perhaps what someone says for their own agenda and for their own purposes. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to watch the commencement speech in its entirety. Now, let me give everybody some background on Harrison Butker. Harrison Butker is the field goal kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's probably one of the top 3 kickers in the league. So I would say he would be up there with Brandon Aubrey of the Cowboys and Justin Tucker of the Ravens. So apparently he gave a commencement speech at a small private Catholic college in Kansas, but I think it's not far from Kansas City, Missouri. So I listened to his speech from beginning to end. And I think I mentioned that he is a Catholic and he gave a commencement speech at a Catholic college. And he expressed his views. He expressed his opinions on different topics. And his views and opinions basically are in lockstep with the beliefs of devout Catholics. So nothing he said was out of bounds as far as that particular audience was concerned. Some of the things that he said that upset people that weren't there and that had to hear about it through the media outlets, or they had to go search for what he said. He praised his wife and gave her, fantastic accolades for being a wonderful mother.
How dare he
also,
do that? What a scumbag.
Yeah. And basically being thankful for the family that he has and for her decision to be a homemaker, and how noble and how vital that is. And, people seem to have an issue with that. He also talked about Catholic leaders holding them accountable to be the leaders that they're supposed to be, to adhere to true Catholic principles, not letting the world dictate how they lead. And I think he mentioned abortion, which, again, devout Catholics are against abortion, and some other things that, some people did not like. So I look at it like this. He went there in his own private, personal capacity. He didn't get up there and say, hey, I'm Harrison Butker. I'm the field goal kicker or place kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm representing the NFL, and here's what I have to say. He did not say that. Mm-hmm. He expressed his own personal views and opinions to an audience that was receptive to it because they are Catholic. I feel like that the people that are offended by what he said, I'm just not understanding, because you weren't the target of his comments. You weren't there. You weren't in the audience. So,
right.
So you had to search to see what he said. And at that point, you were offended by what he said. And some are even demanding that he be traded, demanding that he be fired
for a female kicker
because he expressed his own personal views and opinions. Now, I want to say this. I'm not making light or dismissing anybody that disagrees with Harrison Butker. That is your prerogative. You can disagree with whomever you choose. However, to me, taking it a step further and being offended by what he said and then demanding that he be removed, basically, our cancel culture, to me, that's wrong. If the people that were in the audience were offended by what he said, why are you offended, especially after you had to go look for what he said? So,
right.
And I'm sure we'll get into this in a little while. So his coach came out and supported him, his quarterback, the owner's wife, and I'll read what she said once we get into some detail about some of the things he said. And basically, for the most part, the people that agree with him, they agree with him. But even people that don't agree with him, but support him, basically came out and say, hey, I don't agree with everything he said, but you know what? He's a stand-up guy. He is a high character guy, and I support him. I don't have to agree with everything he says for him to be in my circle, for him to be a friend or a coworker or whatever the case may be. And to me, that's the way it ought to be. I have friends that are polar opposite from me when it comes to social issues, politics, what have you. But guess what? They're still my friend. I'm not going to exclude you as a friend because you don't agree with everything I agree with. And I think we've lost a lot of that in America. Just because I disagree with you does not mean I hate you. And I think that's what this boils down to. The uproar over what he said, I'm just really scratching my head. Again, I listened to his speech in its entirety. I'm like, what is wrong with what he just said? So, Kyle, I'll kick it back to you. I know you have some things displayed there. And, once we get into some of the, I guess, specific things he said, I can follow up with what the wife of the team owner said. She was not offended by what he said. And it seems like either some groups of women were directly offended or some other people were offended for those women. But on the flip side, the sales of Harrison Butker's women's jerseys are skyrocketing. I think they're selling out, but they are really moving off the shelves. I didn't even know he had jerseys. I mean, he's a place kicker. It's not like it's not like you see a lot of people walking around with a field goal kicker's jersey. His, his are selling like
that's
hotcakes.
George Blanda, maybe.
Yeah, maybe George Blanda or Mark Mosley. I think he can.
Oh, I love Mark Mosley.
Mosley. Yeah, straight on kicker. But yeah, so I think you have a lot of people that are fine with what he said and support him. And again, there are some other people that don't necessarily agree with what he said, but they still support him. So to me, he expressed views along the lines of his Catholic beliefs, along the lines of the folks in the audience. And that speech was not intended for anybody else outside of who was in the audience that day.
Yeah, exactly. And Tracy, thank you for that comment there. Amen, 100%. I have a lot to unpack here. I'm just going to go through this like a lightning round sort of thing. There's a meme out there that basically says, right, it's a picture of what they call NPCs, which are non-playable characters. It's an analogy for video game playing things that just move around in the background because they just move around. They do whatever the programmer tells them to do. An NPC is a person who basically gets offended based on what people tell them to be offended for. And there's a meme on that, and several actually. This is nothing more than cultural Marxism. Let's just be clear. All right. This is opportunists coming in to jump onto a topic because it's very popular to force their own agenda. And the hypocrisy is obvious. And the reason why it's obvious to us is because we're actually sane. But the reason why it's not obvious to them is because the mantra for the Marxists essentially is the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. So as long as the ends justify the means, or maybe I said it backwards, whatever, that is what's important to them. And so that's the thing there. And so he's just another victim of this sort of thing. We talked backstage here, Greg, about the NFL. Basically, just should have been no comment on this. And you made a good point about that he spoke to a private school. I'm assuming it's private. It was Catholic.
Yes, private.
Yep. Okay. And so it's an audience that's tailored to him, right? And so the key thing people need to know when they do speech writing or when they do speeches is to, number one, know your audience. Any good speaker is going to know who they're talking to, which is why they usually pull the audience, say, hey, how many of you this? So they can get an idea of who they're going to deal with, right? And so him talking to their audience, he's talking to Catholics. And I believe you said, Greg, that they had a standing ovation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I read, that he got a standing ovation and a very positive response from the audience. And
so that's another thing. So, there's more to this. We're going to actually play a video from Jillian Michaels. She is, well, I know her from The Biggest Loser. And if you watch that show back in the mid 2000s, she was the tough one, right? I mean, she was the one that people would quit. I mean, this woman is tough as nails. And so let's play this clip from her. I got it on the screen here. Let's do this, and then we'll comment on this. So here we go. Here she is here. Jillian Michaels upends controversy with question, someone please tell me what I'm missing. So here she is on, I think, Fox News, I believe. And let's play this.
Fitness expert Jillian Michaels joins Primetime. Let's start with the kicker. So they're going to get rid of the guy, and they're going to put a female soccer player who's never kicked a single field goal in college on the, I guess, the last team that won the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Well, here's the good news, Jesse, is that there was a study published in SportsMed that actually assessed the possibility for such things to happen. And in fact, football kicker was one of the sports they looked at. And men had a 16 to 22% advantage over women in kicking a football. So I don't know how realistic that is. And more to the point, as a person who probably couldn't be more different than said kicker, I'm a female businesswoman, I'm gay, I'm not religious. I really don't understand what this man said that has everybody calling for his head. Somebody tell me what I'm missing when there are literally children on a college campus down the street calling for the death of all Jews, but we're protecting their First Amendment rights. But this...
I'm going to break it there real quickly, just really quickly. You have people calling for genocide that no one cares about, and they're attacking this guy. Let's just keep going. I mean, the irony, there's whatever.
This guy lives a little different than you, has different opinions than you, and we want his life ruined.
Yeah, what the hell? Joe Biden tells college grads, America's racist and it doesn't love you. And then this kicker says, yeah, you're probably excited to have kids and maybe fall in love. And this guy's on the chopping block, and he could be president again. What about this trans runner? How about the trans runner? It's smoking all the women, and if you raise a stink, you're canceled.
I completely agree with you. I think the world has lost its mind, and that's why it's important that we have guys like you out there putting these issues front and center.
I mean, that was the best answer you could have possibly given. We just need more guys like me. Jillian Michaels, you're welcome back here anytime.
So, Greg, what's your comments on that? I mean, I mentioned my thing about across the town, they're doing genocide calls, but this guy here who's a kicker, which, by the way, I mean, it sounds like, first of all, well, I don't want to get into that, but it seems like you have a kicker here, which, by the way, he's really, really good, by the way. He holds the record for the longest Super Bowl field goal, 57 yards, and he looks like a really, really good teammate too. When we'll see a clip from the quarterback who's the head of that team, Mahomes. But what are your thoughts on that particular take from Jillian Michaels?
I think that is a prime example of how we should be as human beings. Jillian Michaels probably couldn't be any more different from Harrison Butker than you can get. I mean, she talked about these stark differences, and she had no problem with what he said. Now, if you're going to be offended, you would think if anybody would be offended, it would be somebody like her, because, Harrison Butker talked about, getting married and raising a family and maybe even, choosing to be a homemaker instead of going out and having a career. Well, she's a very famous entrepreneur and businesswoman, so that's not the route she took. He also mentioned something about Pride Month. To me, it wasn't really offensive. He was talking about pride in general, and then he made the statement, well, we have a month dedicated to that. But he talked about the deadly sin of pride, and then he made that statement. Well, I'm like, well, I don't see what the problem is. She's gay, and she had no issue with his speech. Politically, I'm sure they're polar opposites as well. But at the end of the day, she's like, I don't understand what the big deal is. He has a right to his opinion and she has a right to hers. She has a right to disagree with what he said. But just because she disagrees, that does not give her the right to try to have him canceled or fired. And she did make a good point that there are colleges right near there where you have students calling for the death of Jews, harm to Jews, Jewish students that are being harassed simply because they're Jewish, and these misguided students harassing them over a situation in the Middle East they likely don't even fully understand. So you have all of that going on, and we are focusing our vitriol towards a field goal kicker who
I'm sorry.
who spoke to, I mean, yeah, it's laughable when you say it out loud, right? They're having a fit about a field goal kicker who goes to a private Catholic college to uplift them and inspire them and talk to them about living true to the godly principles and virtues and values that Catholicism is based on. So, you know, I think going back to the NFL, and I'm going to go ahead and read the statement that the NFL submitted and presented, I guess, to the general public and the media. I think they put out a statement basically saying, Harrison Butker gave a speech in his personal capacity. Yeah, we know that. Jonathan Bean, NFL Senior Vice President and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, said in a statement released Thursday, his views are not those of the NFL as an organization. The NFL is steadfast in our commitment to inclusion, which only makes our league stronger. So let me stop right there. He is Senior Vice President and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Inclusion, okay?
Right.
But, you know, at the same time you're saying this, you are basically distancing yourself and excluding someone that has a different opinion and view than you do. How is that inclusive when you're only including people that have the same opinions, the same views, and, you know, like the same things and basically stand for the same things you do? How is that not hypocritical? And I'll go back to, I guess it was 2020 or somewhere in there when you had NFL players across the league kneeling during the playing of the national anthem. So let's look at the two. Harrison Butker speaking at a private gathering in a private and personal capacity, speaking to Catholic students. He's Catholic. That's his audience. Not a national forum, not an international forum, private setting. Now let's go to the NFL players that chose to kneel during the national anthem. They did that under the capacity of NFL players representing the NFL on a very national and nationwide platform, expressing themselves in a way that I'm sure, because I was offended by it, and I know a lot of other people were, that offended, I'm sure, thousands that were in attendance at those games and millions that were watching it on TV. So Harrison Butker, a private citizen, NFL players kneeling, they literally have the NFL shield on their jerseys. They're representing the NFL, and they are acting in a way that is very divisive, very offensive to a lot of Americans, both at the games and watching. Did the NFL release a statement distancing themselves from that act? I don't recall one. Do you?
Nope.
So to me, the NFL is trying to play both sides of the fence. And instead of doing that, just don't say anything. they need to be more worried about players that are gambling,
being up their wives,
their spouses and their partners, DWI, gun possession, the list goes on. They need to be more worried about players that engage in those activities than worrying about Harrison Butker giving a commencement speech at a small Catholic college. So I think the NFL is not helping, because when you distance yourself from something or somebody, you are suggesting that that person and what that person said is very bad. And you've got other people jumping in, basically observing the same thing. Wow, the NFL they're distancing themselves from what he said. It must be awful. So let's be mad about it. So the NFL is not helping. And, they really should have just stayed out of it. They should have just stayed out of it. The first part of what I read, Harrison Butker gave a speech in his personal capacity. That should have been the end of it.
That should have been the end of it. Exactly right. 100%.
Yeah. There's no need to go any further with the statement. But since they insisted on doing that, now you're making it an issue when there should be no issue. So I'm going to read what the wife of the Kansas City Chiefs team owner said. She says, affirming motherhood and praising your wife, as well as highlighting the sacrifice and dedication it takes to be a mother, is not bigoted. Tavia Hunt wrote on Instagram, it is empowering to acknowledge that a woman's hard work in raising children is not in vain. Countless highly educated women devote their lives to nurturing and guiding their children. The owner of the team said that.
Yep. I'm looking at
and she's a woman, by the way. So
no, I think you segue right into the segment I want to talk about. I'm looking at my notes here. It says, discussion connecting the Butker topic to broader conservative values in sports. You just nailed it right there. You nailed it. I mean, continue with your thought. I'll wrap it up. But I was going to get into some other things too, but on this. But we can go on for probably 3 hours on this. But go on, finish your thought there.
Yeah. Well, the only other thing I was going to say. Yeah, appreciate it. So the only other thing I was going to say is just in summary. I think we have so many other more serious and critical issues, not just in sports, but in our society today. And Jillian Michaels touched on one of them that's absolutely troubling and shameful. Jewish people that are being attacked simply because they're Jewish. And isn't that racist and bigoted? It certainly is. And over what's happening in the Middle East, that's a serious problem. We have other problems going on in society that I'm sure we're all well aware of. Things that are more critical and deserve our attention a whole lot more than what a field goal kicker said at a commencement speech. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. And to me, we have too many people across the board that spend too much time being told what to be offended by, being told what to think, and basically looking for something to be triggered over. I wish people would use that time more wisely and be more productive with their energy towards things that actually help people and not hurt people.
Perfect. And Tracy, thank you so much. You segued perfectly into what I was going to talk about. I'm glad you put that up there. She says, it all boils down to him believing something that was biblical and speaking about it. The world is sad. And I would take it a certain level deeper than that. I would go as far as saying demonic, but this is a family program. I don't want to go too much into that because it's ugly. So, but you mentioned the only argument that I can roughly see that the left could really come at him with is, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but they could say, hey, well, he attacked pride. He attacked pride. Well, based on the context that you told me, Greg, because I didn't watch the whole speech. I should have, but I didn't. Frankly, I didn't care what he said because there's something called the First Amendment. So there was that. So I'm glad you read it. Listened to it so you could give us specifics. But all in all, I really didn't care what he said. But by him saying pride in the context that you mentioned, Greg, pride, that was a biblical reference. The Bible's been around, last I checked, about 6,000 years, roughly? I mean, so I'm like, so it wasn't his fault that the LGBTQ movement chose that word. Pride was an element of a biblical standpoint way back from a theological standpoint about pride being, the downfall, the pride being the fall of Satan, wasn't it? Lucifer was in heaven. He was prideful. He thought he could be God, and God cast him out. It was pride. That was the original, in that case, sin on his part. So it's not Butker's fault that that was the original point of his topic. They happened to they associate their cause with that word. So that should have been mutually exclusive. It shouldn't even been an issue. But these are virtue signalers, and they want to engage this cultural Marxism because they want to advance their own agenda. And so, yes, so Tracy, you're absolutely right. And so deeper than what I just said, the foundation of our society is built on the family. And I'll say this as well, that I had a person say this on Facebook, and I commented, she was mad that she felt that he attacked traditional marriage and that he was coming down on people who decided to go work and not be a stay-at-home mother, so to speak. And I'm like, I don't think he did that.
He didn't.
He's just saying it's an option, and to encourage people to do it, that there's actually fulfillment in that, because what we're seeing now in society is being a stay-at-home mom means you're a bumpkin, you're out of step, you're not progressive, and you're not living your best life. But survey after survey after survey says that women who spend time with their kids, particularly those who are home with their kids, more times than they can be if they were working, are much happier people. And that statistic has been there for decades. And the Bible speaks to that as well. So yes, Tracy, it does come down to biblical points, and speaking out on it really infuriates the left. And I won't get into that because I think it falls into a certain level of well, we'll leave it there, Greg.
Sure.
Do you have anything?
I'd like to mention, if I could, Kyle, one more thing that he mentioned that triggered quite a few people.
Okay.
So he encouraged the male students in the audience to not be ashamed of their masculinity, not being ashamed of being men and being leaders. He encouraged them to embrace that role, and that masculinity has its place and men in society have a certain place. And he mentioned fatherless homes and the problems that that situation is causing. And he encouraged, I think, everybody in the crowd. It's like, well, leave here, go get married, have families, be leaders, live your lives according to, what God would have you want to do. Don't be ashamed of, your life and you're living for God and all of those things. And, touching on that topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about, as far as men and fathers not being in the homes. Guess who mentioned that several years ago, specifically saying that, and I think he may have been speaking specifically about Black families, that
Obama?
Yes, that Black fathers not being in the home is causing issues with young Black men. They are incarcerated at a much higher rate than those that are in homes with two parents and have the father in the home. President Obama said that. So if you want to be mad at Harrison Butker mentioning that, President Obama said it too. So again, I said all that to say this again, with people getting so offended so easily, it's very frustrating, because when you are easily offended, you tend not to take it all in and listen to everything within its own context. Now, a lot of people got mad with what Harrison Butker said because they saw 2 or 3 excerpts from a 20-minute speech.
Exactly.
And they just jumped up and got upset about it. Well, guess what? Did you watch and listen to the whole thing? I bet you didn't. If you had listened to all that within its proper context, maybe you might not get so mad. But, you know, some people, they're going to get mad regardless. So, but I feel like, come on, folks, take a deep breath and just, you know, look at these things and look at them with a more, you know, balanced eye. And at the end of the day, you know, look at what Harrison Butker said in its totality. And if somebody like Jillian Michael says, this is a nothing burger, do people still say that, nothing burger? I guess they do. I'll have to ask my kids. But anyway, this is a nothing burger. If somebody like her, who is just about as different from Harrison Butker as you can be, if somebody like her can get on national TV and say, hey, this is nothing, what are we getting mad about? Then shouldn't everybody have that same attitude? So that's about all I have to say on Harrison Butker. To me, be strong and don't let this deter you from doing what you did. And, you know, more people support you than you probably realize. And, you know, I think it was good for his teammates and his coach to come out and support him, even though they don't agree with him. And, you know, the term agree to disagree, I think we've forgotten how to do that as a society. Again, if I disagree with you, that doesn't mean I hate you. I just disagree. We can still be friends. I want us to still be friends, because when we are different from each other, that's how we learn and grow. If we were all the same and thought the same and believe the same things, it'd be a pretty boring world, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So, give Harrison Butker a break. I mean, he really didn't say anything that was really bad. I think people are looking for things to be offended by. And again, his audience was a Catholic, private Catholic, devoutly Catholic school. And what he said was along the lines of what their values are and what they believe.
Yeah. And I was going to comment, I was going to show the clip of the quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, but I'm not going to show that clip. Basically, he said, and the reason why I didn't like what he said, I liked what he said, him defending him, but it wasn't about the issue of him having free speech and being able to say what he wants to say on his own time, but it was just like, he's a nice guy, leave him alone. And so I appreciate that, but like you said, Greg, I don't think they necessarily agree with him, but I think they supported him as a person, which is, I'll take that. And also there was something dealing with them trying to replace him with a kicker who happens to be female. And that gets into the whole thing about, you know, the Marxism part of it, where people are just trying to push their own agenda. They don't care about this. All they want to do is get a female kicker in there for whatever reason. It goes on to other things we say on this channel all the time about how a minority of people try to hijack a particular TV show, movement, whatever it may be, so that they can get something across, because they can't do it themselves, because no one actually really agrees with them. So they just hijack whatever and slurp something else. So I think we covered that pretty well. And so with that, unless there's anything else you want to talk about, Greg, on this topic?
I think we beat this horse enough, don't you?
I think we did for 30 minutes. I think we did about as good as we could do. And so I think with that, I think we'll just drop it there. And so that wraps up episode 13 of the Old Glory Games podcast. For Greg and myself, thank you so much for supporting us. Again, if you want to send us questions, we just did a question and answer session yesterday, please do so in the comments below or send your questions to questions@theconservativetake.com. Until then, we'll see you in the next one.